All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to unpack a pretty surprising truth today. Why do young athletes just suddenly decide to walk away from soccer? If you're a parent, a coach, or really just someone fascinated by how learning and psychology kind of intersect in youth sports, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to look really closely at the data to figure out what's actually going on beneath the surface when a child hangs up their cleats for good.
So part one, why kids really quit. And spoiler alert, it comes down to losing confidence. Let's dive right in and challenge the absolute biggest, most widely accepted assumption parents make about youth sports. We have to start by looking at the story we tell ourselves when a young player decides they're done with the game. It's incredibly common to just assume that a child simply outgrew the sport or, found a new hobby. We hear it all the time on the sidelines, right? Oh, he just lost interest, or she's kind of more into music now. And honestly, it's a super comforting thought. It implies this totally natural, unavoidable evolution of a kid's passions. It takes the pressure off us as adults. But the data shows us that this widely accepted idea, that kids just spontaneously lose interest, is actually masking a much, much deeper problem.
Here is the actual reality derived from the sources. They aren't just losing interest, they are systematically losing their confidence, and that is a massive distinction. Think about it. Losing interest implies a change of heart. Losing confidence implies a total breakdown in the system. Their love for the game doesn't just evaporate into thin air. Instead, it gets completely crushed under the weight of repeated failure and that horrible internal frustration of simply not feeling good enough anymore. The child still really wants to succeed. They just literally no longer believe that they can.
Which brings us to section 2, the 12-month decline. It's a surprisingly predictable timeline.
Because this devastating loss of confidence, it does not happen overnight. The sources show it actually begins a full year before they finally walk off the pitch. It's a slow burn, a tonally gradual, predictable erosion of self-belief, if you know what you're looking for. Let's map out this heartbreaking 12-month timeline together, looking closely at the really subtle, progressive behavioral signs of a struggling player who's losing their edge. 12 months out, the very first symptom appears. They stop asking for the ball. They rather just blend into the background than take a risk. Fast forward to 8 months prior, and that avoidance turns into active hesitation. When the ball actually does come to them, they freeze up. 4 months out, the anxiety is peaking, and they're constantly looking over at the coach. They're seeking validation, or maybe just bracing for criticism, because they completely lost trust in their own instincts. And finally, just 1 month prior to quitting, they're trapped in this miserable loop of repeating the exact same mechanical mistakes, completely uncorrected. At that point, they're basically just practicing failure. And all of that entire 12-month runway of uncorrected mistakes, ultimately leads directly to this painful breaking point. I don't want to play anymore. When a kid finally drops that bomb, it might feel super sudden to a parent or coach, but as we've just seen on the timeline, this phrase is the culmination of a year-long silent struggle. It's their final surrender after months of watching their own confidence slowly drain away.
Let's move to section 3, the math of team practice. 60 minutes versus 16 players.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how it shifts the blame entirely away from the child's motivation and even away from the team coach. We've established that kids quit because their confidence drops due to uncorrected mistakes. So the logical next step is to figure out why those mistakes are going uncorrected in the first place. It is so easy for frustrated parents to stand on the sidelines and point fingers, assuming the coach simply doesn't know what they're doing. But we need to look at the structural variables here. Is it really a lack of coaching skill, or is it a systemic flaw in how team sports are set up?
If we break down a standard youth soccer practice, we are dealing with a strictly finite amount of time spread across a very crowded field of kids. Imagine your typical Tuesday evening training session. You've got exactly 60 minutes of scheduled practice time. On the other side of the equation, you have a roster of 16 highly energetic, easily distracted young players, and let's be real, half of them are probably just thinking about post-game snacks anyway. One coach, 60 minutes, 16 developing athletes. Let's actually do the math on that. Here is the absolute drop-the-mic math. In a standard 1-hour practice, your child is only receiving 3.7 minutes of actual individualized coaching. Think about that number for a second. 3.7 minutes. That is literally less time than it takes to listen to a single pop song. For the other 56+ minutes of that practice, your child is essentially out there on their own, trying to navigate complex physical movements in total chaos.
Because of this math, bad habits aren't just slipping by uncorrected. Those exact same bad habits are being actively repeated and reinforced in crowded team trainings. Guys, it is absolutely not bad coaching, it's just math. A single coach cannot possibly watch the specific foot placement, body angle, and touch of 16 different players all at the exact same time. It's impossible. So when a player receives a pass with bad technique, the coach doesn't see it. The player does it again and again. They are literally building muscle memory for the exact wrong mechanics.
Which brings us to our final part. Section 4. Correcting reps and saving confidence.
Now that we understand the brutal math that causes that 12-month confidence decline, we can actually do something about it. Let's move to the solution and see how this builds toward a highly targeted, private fix for that 3.7-minute problem. The answer to rebuilding confidence is not simply sending them to the backyard for more reps. It is the focused application of corrected reps. Telling a kid who has bad technique to go juggle the ball for an hour is only going to cement those bad habits even deeper. Corrected reps change the game entirely. It means moving away from passive repetition and moving to active, highly supervised refinement. It's all about quality over quantity, making sure the brain and the body are learning the absolute right way to move.
And here is the really incredible part. Our sources note that targeted authority from a private coach can fix structural issues incredibly fast. So fast, in fact, that one single focused session is capable of unraveling half a year of bad touches. No joke. Because the coach in a private session isn't distracted by 15 other players, right? They can apply 100% of their focus to one athlete. They can instantly spot the bad touch, stop the drill, fix the biomechanics, and run it again properly. This kind of intense, targeted authority honestly acts like a time machine for skill development.
Let's recap exactly how this framework successfully rebuilds an athlete based on the source material. First, it completely bypasses that 3.7-minute math problem by providing a full 60 minutes of individualized focus. Second, it replaces the dangerous more reps mindset with a strict adherence to corrected reps. Third, it provides immediate feedback, so the player finally clearly understands the feeling of a bad touch versus a good touch. Fourth, every single touch is watched, meaning mistakes literally have nowhere to hide. And finally, by fixing these mechanical issues super fast, we stop that anxiety loop right in its tracks, rescuing the player's confidence way before they ever get to the point of saying, "I don't want to play anymore."
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself, how are you going to approach your child's next practice, now that you know exactly how the math affects their love for the game? We started today by debunking the myth of losing interest, and we uncovered the harsh reality of the 3.7-minute practice environment. You now have a really clear view into the silent 12-month struggle of a player losing their confidence. The structural flaws in standard team training are totally undeniable, but as we've seen, they're also entirely fixable. So the question is, will you let the math of a crowded field dictate your child's athletic journey, or will you step in, change the equation, and protect their confidence? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this fresh perspective gives you exactly what you need to keep your young athletes thriving out there.